Hey everyone, welcome to another Friday Sew with Sarah here on Hoop Sisters YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us again. Go ahead and say hi in the comments so we know you're here and watching because we have a fun one for you today. So what we're going to do is a little different today, but we are going to stitch out a block, but you got to stay tuned until the end to figure out how to get that block for free. So this is the block we're going to stitch out. We're calling this our bunny block. It's really cute. Got some piecing up in the top of the block and then a bunny applique complete with the cute little tail right there. So what we're going to do is we are going to jump over to the machine right now and we'll stitch this out together. And like I said, hang out with us for a little while, stitch this out watch me stitch this out. And then at the very end, you will see how you can snag this for free just for watching today. So over at the machine, I have our battleizer, which is our batting stabilizer combination in the hoop. And the very first step for the bunny block is very similar to a lot of the blocks that we've stitched together. So that's just where we're going to put our water soluble thread in the needle, and I'm going to sew my placement stitch. Step 2 is our optional step to add wool batting if you'd like. This is really a great option if you want to add some dimension to your bunny block. I would use this if I were making like a wall hanging or something like that. I am just going to use this for a cute little coaster on my desk though, so I'm going to skip this step. And then our next step, we'll keep the water soluble thread in the needle and we are going to sew a placement stitch for our fabrics. So we're moving on to step 4, and along the top left side of my block, I'm going to have 2 different fabrics that are alternating, and then I'll have a third fabric down on the lower right hand side. So to start out with, I'll take fabric 1 and lay it over the placement stitch, and then with water soluble thread, I'll tack this down. Our next step in the bunny block is going to be to trim our fabric before we move on. So I'll just use our hoop scissors mini with that nice offset handle, and I'm going to trim a scant 1/4 inch on all sides on the inside of the block. For step 5, we'll take our second piece of fabric and we're going to lay it right side down over the first. We want to approximately align the raw edges with the first, and then with a neutral thread in the needle, we'll sew our seam. Our next step, we will keep the neutral thread in the needle. We're going to take our fabric and flip it right side up, finger press and smooth out, and then we'll sew the tack down. And now we'll use our hoop scissors mini again, and we will trim a scant 1/4 inch from that tack down. Now we're moving back to fabric 1, and we'll place that over fabric 2 with the raw edges approximately even, and now we'll sew our seam with that same neutral thread. And then we'll take fabric 1, flip it right side up, finger press and smooth out, and sew our tack down. Now I'm going to trim this a scant 1/4 inch from the tack down again, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish up the rest of this upper left hand side of our block, and we will come back to do the last piece in the lower right hand side. So now we're moving on to step 19 already, and we're going to keep that same neutral thread in the needle, and we'll take fabric 3, place it right side down over everything we just did, and then with that neutral thread in the needle, we'll sew the seam. For our next step, I have a water soluble thread in the needle, and we are going to take fabric 3, flip that right side up, finger press and smooth out, and then with the water soluble thread, we will tack down along the edges of the block as well as do the placement stitch for where we will put the bunny. Now we're on step 21, which will sew the really cute bunny motif quilting that runs throughout the block behind the big bunny applique. So I'll just use the thread and the needle that coordinates with my fabrics. So now that we've got our quilting done, for our next step, we're going to take our bunny fabric and align it over the placement stitch. And I like to just peek under all the edges to make sure everything is covered. And then with a thread that matches our fabric, we'll sew the tack down. So for our next step, we'll be sewing the satin stitch around the edges of the bunny that I just trimmed. And I trimmed that with our Hoop Scissors Mini again. I love that fine point on here because I can get in these little crevices really easy to trim really close to that tack down stitching. But again, step 23, you still have a thread in your needle that matches your bunny fabric, and we'll sew our satin stitch. Now we just have a few steps left, and our next step, step 24, we'll use a thread in the needle that matches the fabric that you're using for the bunny tail, and we're going to sew the placement. So now that we've got our placement, we're going to keep that same thread in the needle, and we're going to align the fabric for the tail, and I'm going to be a little wild and use this cute little bubble minky, and we're going to tack this down. Now I'll use my Hoop Scissors Mini, and I'm going to trim as close as possible to these tack down stitches. For our last step, we'll keep the same thread in the needle, and we're going to sew our satin stitch. Okay, so I actually told you our last one was the last step, but I was wrong. There's one more step. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to add a lining. So I'll take my lining fabric, place it right side down over the block, and just lift up and look under all those edges to make sure it's evenly placed on the block. And then with a neutral thread in the needle, you'll sew the tack down for the lining. It will leave probably about a 3.5 to 4 inch opening to turn it right side out afterwards. Alrighty, so we're done with everything in the hoop. What I'll do is I'm going to remove this from the hoop. I'll use our trimmer by George to trim all that battleizer up to the basting stitch on all sides. And then I'll just trim the top of the block a 1/4 inch from basting stitch. Turn it right side out, press, and top stitch it closed, and then we will show you what our block, how it turned out. All right, and here is our cute little bunny block. This was a fun one to stitch out. Like I said, I just did the lining on it because I'm going to use it as a little coaster. I think it's fun and festive. If you wanted to use it in something larger, like a wall hanging, that's where we would recommend using that wool, additional wool batting. That's an option. And then you could just back it in a traditional way and skip the lining portion of it. But this was a fun one, and like I promised, check the code at the bottom of the screen and you will see how to get this for free from our website for a limited time. So make sure you go snag that. Thank you so much for watching and joining me again this Friday. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next Friday.